The name of Jesus is being despised right now in many quarters around the world because what's happening in Gaza and what's happened to the Palestinian overall in general, without overlooking the suffering of the Israeli Jews. By the way, we have to be careful, Israeli Jews and not Jews in general. In order to when you have a bully at the school, you have to stop him bullying other people the weak, and not try to not try to get into his mind. Right now, the bully, right now, the state of Israel, with its military power, with a license, especially for the United States of America and all of that, is doing all of that. That has to stop. And understanding the failure of that has to stop. The first thing, the war has to stop. And instead of trying to understand a man that is in his 30s beating up 5-year-old boy, we first of all, you stop the 30-year-old man beating up the 5-year-old boy. That's what is needed right now. The Palestinian people are not fighting the Israeli Jews. I think there is or resisting the Israeli Jews. I think there is, maybe I'll give you a different perspective. America, Canada, France, England, and Germany, other nations, are fighting the Palestinians. There are American soldiers in our country, British soldiers in our country. There are weapons and bombs being supplied by United States, England, and that. So we are not dealing with Israeli Jews. We're dealing with the Western world. The Western world is the one. The Biden is the one that's supplying the bombs. Biden did not veto ceasefire at the Security Council. And that is not coming to say discounting that or discounting what Hamas did or discounting the killing or all the atrocities that Hamas did. As a Christian, many times I hear the question, what would you do if you were Israeli at 7th of October? And I'll say, I'll stop. I'll think. Mm-hmm. I'll think my reaction, my responsibility. I'll think if bombing the neighbor is going to solve the problem, if bombing the neighbor brings a hostage, if bombing the homes and hospitals and schools is going to solve that.
Welcome back to the channel, everyone. My name is June Robbins Foreman, and I'm host of Conversation Cafe. Today I have two guests with me, Dr. Salim Munayer. I know I'm getting the pronunciation wrong, so if you would just say your last name, Salim.
Munayer, that's okay, thank you.
Thank you. And Phil Wagler, both of the Peace and Reconciliation Network of World Evangelical Alliance. So welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you, welcome.
Yeah, thanks, June.
I'm going to start off by just giving a little bit of background on Phil, and then I'll move to Salim. So Phil Wagler serves as the EFC's global liaison. So EFC is Evangelical Fellowship of Canada, and as the global director of World Evangelical Alliance, the Peace and Reconciliation Network. His vocational experience includes pastoral, Bible college, and global mission agency work. Phil has pastored in Ontario, Alberta, and British Columbia. He served as Associate Dean of Students at Emmanuel Bible College and led training for Multiply, the global mission agency of the Mennonite Brethren Churches in Canada. Phil is author of 3 books, one of which I've read and I highly recommend, Live Your Assignment, also Kingdom Culture and Ambassadors of Christ. Phil has a blog, All Things Reconcile, at faithtoday.ca, and a podcast series at the Evangelical Fellowship of Canada.ca if you want to check out more of his work. Phil and his wife Jen have 6 children, and they're based here in Kelowna. I first met Phil about 5 years ago. I zoomed into his podcast during COVID, and I was just absolutely drawn to become closer to God. I wanted to be a better ambassador of Christ, to change the things in my life that needed to be changed, to see the church as in a kingdom mentality. And I'm ever so grateful for Phil to be on this podcast today. And I asked Phil if he would talk a little bit with me about the nature or the relationship of the Jews today with God. Are they still the chosen people of God? Did they fulfill what they were chosen to do? What exactly is their relationship with God today, according to his biblical understanding? And Phil suggested that we invite Salim to come into this discussion as well. Salim, I understand, you were born in a Palestinian Christian family, and you interacted in your youth with Muslims and Palestinians and Christians. And from that experience, you have a diverse background. And then you went into theology, and you created, or you founded, an organization that is, in Arabic, it means reconciliation. And I see it on your screen. Musallaha, is that how you say it?
Good, good.
Okay. You are an adjunct professor at Fuller Theological Seminary at Pepperdine University, as well as the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, and also at the Bethlehem College. Is that correct?
True.
Okay, so you've also been teaching reconciliation to Israelis, Palestinians, and internationals for 30 plus years. I'm really looking forward to hearing what you have to say today. So welcome.
Thank you. I just want to mention, like Phil, I'm married to Kay, and I have 4 lovely boys, and we have 3 grandchildren, and the first granddaughter almost 3 months ago. So we are very happy. We're thankful.
Yeah,
especially now that you have a little girl in the family.
Yeah, at last.
It's about time.
About time.
Wonderful. Thank you for reminding me of that. I'll start today with the first question. What exactly were the Jews chosen for? So for an audience that's not even perhaps familiar with the history of the Jews, Salim, can we start with you? What were the Jews chosen for?
Yeah, when you pose these questions, the many things come to mind, and I think one of the things, especially to help Christian, is to really differentiate between many terms. So the one term that is very important is Israelite. The term Jews came much later, and also Zionism. Zionism is a national movement in the beginning, mostly of European Jews. So when I speak to Christians, they're very, very confused about all this term, because the politics of today really color their perspective, and their knowledge is basically stop with the destruction of the temple. They don't really understand 2,000 years of history, and also colored by the bad and awful experience that Jews has, especially in Europe, from European Christians. So there is a lot of guilt, and there is, as a result of the guilt of the Holocaust, a lot of ideology and theology has been developed that really also color our understanding of the scripture. What I would like to do is very, very quick overview. We first need to start with God creating the world. And when God created the world, he created man and woman in his image. And he commanded them, entrusted them to be the vicar, to be the responsible, to be the God representative on earth, on the garden. But Adam and Eve rebel against God, and we know the consequences of that. The consequences, it's first that they were relationship with God disturbed, the relationship between man and woman disturbed, relationship with the creation is disturbed that God created. And the first exile happened as a result of that. So they moved out of the garden. And God started his salvation plan from that moment when he said to the woman, from the seed of the woman, it will crush the head of Satan.
Mm-hmm.
It's the only place in Hebrew the word seed, zera, is mentioned, because all the other places in the Bible, when we talk about women, is born of a woman. A woman doesn't have seed. So here the first prophecy about the Messiah that will restore. With unsuccessful attempt with all humanity that lead to Noah Ark, the floods, the Tower of Babel. And this is the key things. God called Abraham, or Abram. So Abraham is a person that is being called by God. And an act of obedience, he left his home, his family. He went to far away, that because the seed of Abraham, Jesus the Messiah, he is the one that will be the one that brings salvation for the world. So when Abraham could not have children, and this is very, very important story to deal with that, is that legally Sarah chose a lady, Hagar, for him to have a child, and Ishmael legally is the son of Sarah, not the son of Hagar. The reason for that God wanted to show Abraham, when he was, his wife and him, beyond ability to have children, that the child of the promise, he is the chosen one, not the physical one. And that's many people mistakenly thinking it is or the son of Hagar or the son of Ishmael. That's not the issue. It's God miraculously chose people to be his instrument to communicate to the world.
Okay, I'm just going to stop you there, because I think that's an important
yes,
an important concept, one that I was not familiar with. So you're saying that the child of Hagar is actually legally the child of Sarah. So when you think of the children of Abraham, Ishmael is actually one of those children, and legally Ishmael belongs to Sarah.
Yes, that's right. And that is very clear, because later Abraham said, Ishmael, my son, because Ishmael, God here. That's the meaning of that. And very, very interesting in exegesis, some Jewish exegesis, the story of Ishmael is equivalent for God sacrificing Isaac, and God sacrificed Ishmael by sending him to the death. To the desert, and God saved him in the desert because he is the son of Abraham. Why we have those discussions? Because we have the wrong understanding of people of God and chosenness, that we attribute it to DNA, we attribute it to ethnic identity, and the scripture reject that all the time. Chosen people, God's people, are people that responded by faith to God. And that is a key thing. So Abraham, after that, has his son Isaac, has two children from the same mother at the same time. Jacob is being the one and not Esau. So throughout the scripture, first you have Abraham, then Jacob is called Israel as a person, then his family, children of Israel. So the children of Israel, that was the designation of the people of God at that time, and not the word Jews. Jews came later, after the destruction of the kingdom of Israel, from the tribe of Judah. And that is also very important history.
Okay, so Salim, but you are saying something that is unusual to me, in that there's not this DNA, there's not this lineage that's attributed to the children of God. And I think many Christians believe, certainly around the time after Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, that there was this lineage. In fact, I spoke with Rabbi Yaakov Shapiro. He said the mothers that were present at Mount Sinai, they they embodied all the children that were to come. So whatever mother was present, the lineage and the children from those mothers, whether or not they practiced Judaism or not, they were in fact the nation of
Yeah.
Israel, or the Jews. So can you
Yeah,
explain a little bit more, and Phil, jump in whenever you feel like.
That's rabbinical position, by the way. It's not biblical position. That is that it's developed in 2nd century. The lineage comes through the mother, not through the father. As in the scripture, you see the father is determining the people belonging, and not the mother. But here there is something is very important. It is in and out at the same time. It's not that or that.
Okay.
It's a lineage and not lineage at the same time. So, for example, the children of Israel going out of Egypt, and already we know the children of Jacob have married women from different groups, including mixed group. People did not have this ethnic purity in marriage as some people today has, or especially in some countries and some cultures. So it was all the time, it's a mixture of people. And so when the children of Israel went out of Egypt into the desert to be formed as a people with the covenant of Moses, many multitude of people came out with the children of Israel. So it was a mixture of people, including Moses. As you know, Moses married Midianite. She's an Arab lady.
Mm-hmm.
The Midianite is an Arab tribe. Then he married a lady from Africa, Cush, that she was black ladies, and that his sister Miriam was very upset with him. But here you have something that is very important. God is creating for him a people group,
Mm-hmm.
that this people group are bound together by lineage and covenant. That's mean, and the lineage that there are, some of them are the children of Abraham and Jacob, but all other people that join in through marriage or by faith into this group, and this group is connected in covenant. And this is a really important aspect. They're not connected because of blood. They're not connected because of ideology. They're not connected because they live in certain geographical place or because of language or nationality. They are connected in covenant. And this covenant that is determined who are the people, the part of the people of God, and who are the people are going to be out of it. So this covenant is binding. The covenant of Moses is binding to the children of Israel, who
Mm-hmm.
are the chosen people. And here come very important aspect. This covenant that is between people and God, that is require holiness because of God is holy, require certain holiness in relationship between each other. But more than anything else, the relationship to God, the relationship to people determine your resident in the land. When God is saying to them throughout all the time, remember, this land is not yours, it's mine. The land is mine.
Mm-hmm.
You are so strange. You are pilgrimage to the land. And because the whole land for me. And so the children of Israel become the microscope, or like when somebody go to the doctor, and through the doctor take a cell of how God deal with all humanity, but at the same time, it's a failure of humanity, and the failure of humanity to keep the covenant.
So Salim, are you saying then the covenant is the determining factor of who is resident in the land? I think that's what you just said. So
yes,
are you
sure.
saying then if I was an African at that time and I kept covenant in terms of keeping the law with God, or keeping his holiness,
God,
or attempting to, then I would be be part of the tribe of Israel, or part of that nation? Okay.
Yeah, but give you several examples. Ruth the Moabite, another Arab lady. She is the grandmother of King David. If you look in the Gospel of Matthew, it's very, very interesting Gospel of Matthew. Sorry if I speak too much, tell me when to stop.
Not at all.
In the Gospel of Matthew begin because the Gospel of Matthew has been written to Israelite, to Jewish people. And he gives the lineage of the genealogy of Jesus that go to King David. And it's very interesting. He's mentioning several ladies, and he's not mentioning Sarah. He's not mentioning Rivka or Leah or Rachel. He's mentioning Rahab, the Canaanite prostitute. She's in genealogy of Jesus, of King David. He's mentioning Tamar, is that she was Canaanite that slept with her father-in-law in order to bear a child, and she disguised as a prostitute, and Bathsheba the Hittite. So here Jesus already is countering purity of race among his people at that time, and very classically also was a parable of the sower. Most people look into the parable of the sower as something that talk about evangelism. Matter of fact, when time of Nehemiah and Ezra, when the children of Israel came from the tribe of Judea came from Babylon, and they were in exile, where they were in minority, the purity and not mixing and marrying with a larger society become an issue. So Ezra commanded the Israelite men to divorce their Canaanite wives, if you remember that.
Yes.
Because they were leading them into idol things. And that went to the extreme, and Jesus used the term seed, because at that time, Ezra and Nehemiah becoming the holy seed of Israel. So suddenly the seed, ontologically, the Israelite, the Jew, are different than others. And Jesus said, you have it all wrong. It's not the ontological DNA of the seed will determine what it is. It is fruit. So let's go to the word chosen. Chosen is not a word that is in the Bible, at least the way I understand, is to be separated. It's not that you are better than other. God told the Israel, because you are the least of the nation, I have chosen you, that through you, the nation of the world will be blessed. That is a key thing, is a call for service. And the ultimate chosenness is Jesus. He understood, he embodied, incarnate the chosenness, as in Philippians chapter 2, he didn't think it is worthy for him to be next to God. He became a slave. Chosenness is to be a slave to God for his purpose to the world, and you are supposed to radiate God light. It's not that people come to you to worship you. It's not because you have special knowledge or you special spiritual gift. It is you coming in vessels in the hand of God to communicate his love and his goodness. And the land has been chosen, the land of Canaan, the land of Palestine, that been told even before the Greeks, the land of Israel, the land of Judah, have many names, this land that I live. And this land is, why God chose this land, is because this land was a bridge between Africa, Asia, and Europe. So people when going up and down the Via Maris, the Sea Road, or the King Road, they, through the Israelites, supposed to find who God is. So the missional of God was all the time, was part of his chosenness, separating people for a purpose. And if they are humble before God, and if they're servant to God, they radiate by keeping the covenant to all people around them. And if they don't do that, God said, because you made my name despised in the world, you're going out to exile and all of that. So this is really a very important concept.
Yeah, it's very important. Just to summarize, then, this idea of chosenness isn't because, to begin with, this people group were somehow better than the rest of the people. In fact, it's exactly the opposite. They were more lowly in a sense, not in worth. Maybe, I'm not sure how they were lower in a sense than the rest of the nations, but it was maybe in a sense that they were weaker. God could work through them to show that this isn't about how great you are. This is about how great and magnificent I am. And you are chosen not to lord over, but to serve God,
Yep.
in that you would be a light to the nations. Excuse me. So they would conduct their behavior in such a way that would radiate the love and the holiness and the righteousness of God.
True.
Correct.
Yes, and also you need to take into context that several things. One, that when the children of Israel did not obey God in the desert, only few got into the promised land. And here you have a proof for what I'm saying. And also when you have the two kingdom of Israel, kingdom of Judea, 10 tribes disappeared. So by chosenness doesn't give you any assurance of anything, so the kingdom of Israel got destroyed. But there is also very important thing that we forget when looking at it, because it is time of empires, and empire until today exists. You have the Egyptian empire on one side, that is their god, the Nile. They were the dominant, and people were worshiping the god of Egypt. Then the other side, you have the kingdom, the empire of Babel, Persia, and all of that. And this obscure, problematic land, not empire, controlled by empire, conquered by empire, enslaved by empire, God is using this insignificant people group, number-wise, power-wise, to be for him as a priest. So the children of Israel, the majority of them have not obeyed. So the prophet Jeremiah talked about remnant, and we called about remnant theology. From that remnant, God keep on doing what he is planning to do. But already the prophet and already the book of Deuteronomy, Numbers, God already predicted that the people of Israel fail. The Jewish people, the people of Israel, the children of Israel fail like you and I, like any other nation. There's no difference.
Even Moses told them that they were going to mess it up.
We all messing it up. Yeah. And that is the beauty also, and that is in our failure, in our messing up, God is faithful that he bring his message. This is the whole story of the Gospel of Mark, how the disciple messed it up and failed, and we fail all the time, even in the eyes of people. Jesus failed, he was crucified, then the resurrection coming. So Jesus is the ultimate Israel of God. Jesus is the perfect Jew. Jesus is the perfect, he is the one that God in the prophet said, because you fail, I am myself is coming, Emmanuel. I'm coming to be among you, to be walk with you, and to fulfill what I have promised. So in the New Testament, for the promise to Abraham has been fulfilled in Jesus. What God promised. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, sorry, Salim. I that just tweaks something, because there's this beautiful story. You just said, Jesus he's the fulfillment of the Jew, yes, really. But
yeah, he's the perfect Jew.
In Luke chapter 4, when he's in Nazareth, his hometown, and he unrolls the scroll and speaks from the prophet Isaiah, and he says, "This is now fulfilled in me. The Jubilee of God is fulfilled in me." It's a beautiful moment. It encapsulates everything that you've just said, but there is a visceral reaction on behalf of the people of his hometown, and they want to throw him off a cliff, because immediately following that, he points to the widow of Sidon and Naaman the Syrian,
the
as
enemy, the ultimate enemy,
the oppressor, and the one who is your opposite.
Yeah.
He points to them as the people who understood, and yes, this creates this interethnic clash, even as they have just celebrated him, and now they want to throw him off a cliff, because the confusion they made, and we continue to make, is that we center chosenness or specialness in our ethnic identity rather than in God, who has revealed himself. And so that, I think that's often It's a very telling moment in Luke's gospel where
Yes.
Jesus presents himself as this fulfillment that is rejected even by his own people.
And he spent the time in Galilee, not in Jerusalem, because Galilee is the people mixed with other ethnic groups. Galilee is a pagan Galilee. Is Galilee, there are all those Roman and Greeks and Phoenician. And Jerusalem is the place he's going to be crucified. This is where the purity, the pure race is there, and he rejected it. So biblically, and I understand from what the rabbis say, if I say according to the mother, so Ishmael would be the chosen one because the mother determined that. And we can go on and on and on. So, as a matter of fact, that decision to go to the mother, it was the 2nd century. Professor Cohen talked about it. It's because the rabbinical Jews at that time started to accepting the Roman law that the mother is the one determined the ethnicity of the child. So in Christianity, for example, your birth doesn't determine who you are, who's your Lord. The fact I born to a Christian family doesn't say anything that I'm Christian. I born to a Christian family, to Palestinian family, but when I've been baptized, when I confess Jesus my Lord, I joined that community. And by the way, it is in the Hebrew scripture too. It's in the Old Testament too.
Where is it in the Old Testament, Salim?
Yeah, when the people, they have in every religious holiday, the major religious holiday, have to swear allegiance to God. When they came into Jerusalem, into the temple, and giving the sacrifice, they were declaring that they are the people of the covenant. Some people probably said, we're not going to Jerusalem, we're going to go somewhere else. So people has that choice, that it's true that the Israelites have to do circumcision, but circumcision, as the prophet Jeremiah said, of the hand is not the circumcision of the heart. God is looking for the circumcision of the heart. And Paul, in his letter, is really counter Jewish religious and racial supremacy left and right. And he is saying that Romans chapter 9, the beginning, not all the children of Abraham, let's assume all the Israelites are the children of Abraham, are not the children of God. They're not Israel of God. So your birth doesn't give you any privilege. And that is
Paul,
what
Paul is very clear when he says that. And I just want to make clear that it's not anti-Semitic to say that the Jews somehow failed in keeping covenant with God. It's not anti-Semitic. Yeah, exactly. I was really glad to hear you say that we all fail. And their purpose, I understand their purpose was to be this light to the nations. And when they were not able to keep covenant, God still provided a way for them and us to have relationship with him through that seed. So there are two covenants, the Mosaic covenant and the covenant of Abraham. Can you talk a little bit about the difference between those two covenants?
Yeah, the Abrahamic covenant is universal, and this is really God chose Abraham to be a blessing to the nation, and not what many times I hear by Christian Zionists said, if you bless Abraham, you be blessed. If you curse Abraham, you get cursed. People misunderstanding the Hebrew, and they talk about Abraham, don't talking about the state of Israel. And we need to bless all people, all nation, and Abraham called to be the father of many nations. So the Abrahamic covenant that God did with Abraham has been fulfilled in Jesus. And in Romans chapter 4, this is another thing that many people do not understand, that God promised Abraham the world, the cosmos. And that's what you see, read it in, Paul really understood, because the term from the sea to the river, with the Semitic language that describe, instead of using the word in Greek cosmos, the global, like in America, you say from the shining sea to the sea, is that the term? So this is the terminology of the world of that time in the context of the Persian Empire that claimed that God of Persia is the owner of the world. And God saying, you see this Abraham cannot even have a child. is problematic man. He's problematic with his wife. From him, his seed, Jesus, the Messiah, will God promise the whole world to them. So that is a contra imperial religious context at that time. Where right now this is kind of dealing with racial supremacy and religious supremacy, but there is other aspect. The other aspect, in spite of the failure of the children of Israel, God used them for several things that we have been blessed by, because, as Paul said, they kept the scripture, that through them the scripture came, and that we learned about God through them. By the way, the scriptures say that also through the nature, through the global, we heard about God, and also through the Greeks, but God used them specifically to give us the Bible that is very dear, talk about how God loves us and how God wants to save us, and also that Jesus is the descendant of the King David, that he doesn't have the purity of race. He has lineage of people, men and women, that they were struggling like King David with God. But those women and those men, by faith, struggling, failing, succeeding, that through them, Jesus is, as Paul said in Romans chapter 1, he is from the son of David, but is son of God by the resurrection. So why is saying that? Because he wants to show how God have promised and kept the promise to Abraham. When it comes to the Mosaic covenant, it is the people of Israel become a people in the desert. Before that, they were not. Mm-hmm. And this covenant is different than the Abrahamic covenant, because this covenant, God says, yes, I took you out of Egypt because my promise to the fathers. I love you because I promised to the Father. Now you have a choice. Do you want to be my people or not my people? If you choose to be my people, you are bound by this covenant, marriage covenant. And if you break this marriage covenant, severe consequences is going to happen. And the prophets all the time talked about that. In order to... yeah, go ahead, Phil. Sorry.
No,
yeah,
it's
go
okay.
ahead.
Sorry, Salim, to interrupt.
No.
I think what you said there is really important, because built also then within that Mosaic covenant. So we know from the New Testament, when Jesus is asked, what's the greatest commandment? He says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. And that line, love your neighbor as yourself, is from the Mosaic law, which describes the covenant, which is immediately in the context of welcoming the foreigner among you as a native born, as one that is you. And so even embedded within that covenant is actually a welcoming of the nations. And that was to define and describe this chosenness, that it was actually the enveloping and the becoming of a new family on the earth, where everything else was divided ethnically. Even Israel in its Mosaic covenant was to be defined. Even when Solomon prays for the dedication of the temple, he implores God, when the foreigner turns their face toward here, hear them, forgive them in the same way that you would forgive, the Jew, right? Or the Israeli. That
you're
embedded
right.
within
you're
this.
Right. In the Mosaic law, and that is very important in my discussion with many groups, including especially with Jews here in the land, and in the light of what's happening here in the country. In the Mosaic law, the non-Israelite have equal religious, economic, and citizenship right equal. And in the book of Numbers, God is saying to the Israelite, cursed is the one that have one law to the children of Israel, another law to the stranger. Because when they came out of Egypt, God said to them, remember that I am with the weak, I am with the stranger, I am with the orphan, because this is where I am. This is your test. Your test is in that point. And you brought very, very, very important point, Phil, when you talk about the second command, or that connected to the first, love of your neighbor. That was a huge discussion, Second Temple period, between Jesus and the rabbi. Who is my neighbor? And the majority of the rabbis say, my neighbor is a fellow Jew, is a fellow Israelite. The Jews came later. The term the Jews came later. And Jesus said, no, the Samaritan, the enemy. You have to love your enemy. So your neighbor is not a person from your tribe, look like you, drink like you. It's somebody that he is other. The ultimate other is if the subject of your love and compassion. So I agree with you about this moment that is already embedded in that. But
yeah, I think in the parable of the Good Samaritan, there we often miss from all the distance of time and culture, how radical what Jesus said there. When the Jewish scholar is asking Jesus, "And who's my neighbor?"
Yes,
he essentially says to him, "Go act like a Samaritan."
Yeah.
He says,
yeah.
Go act
And
like this
also,
Samaritan. Yeah.
yeah, the Samaritan, the enemies,
Yeah.
and also with the Samaritan woman, that is, she is the wrong geographical territory, is danger. She's a woman, and she is a woman with reputation. And Jesus says this is the coming of Jesus, the event of Jesus is cosmological change in the history of the world and salvation. Because Jesus said to the Samaritan woman, if up to now, if anyone wanted to know about Yahweh, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, has to cling to Israelite, have to come to Jerusalem, learn about it from the Israelite. But it will be a time that you will worship him not in Jerusalem, not in Mount Gerizim, you worship him in truth and spirit. And this is really, really important things.
Well, Salim,
yeah, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
It really does make sense that God would make a commandment that when the neighbor, the other nations would come into the space of the Jews, that they would show love and kindness to them. Otherwise, how could Abraham be a blessing to all the nations of the world? If they were to shut off their compassion and their resources, etc., to these other nations, what kind of testimony would that be? I think the same goes for us today as Christians. How are we supposed to treat our neighbors who might be the enemy, who might look different than us, have different customs than us, etc.? If we shut off our compassion, our hospitality, what kind of testimony is that? So I want to move into today's context. So we are witnessing this slaughter of Palestinians. We're witnessing an ongoing conflict, many, many years of conflict between the Palestinians and the Israelis. And you're bringing this theology to bear in that there's this concept that among many Christians, the Israelis have the right to be in that land. So could you talk a little bit about, along with Phil, what this theology that you're describing, how to apply it? What does it mean today to the Christian as we look over to this conflict and try to understand and determine how should we support Israel and Palestine? What should be our guiding principles when we consider this conflict?
Yes, here again, God doesn't give the land to anyone. The lands belong to him ultimately. And we are sojourner, and we are here in the land. And as we are here in the land, as vicar or caretaker, responsible. So the story of the theology of the land, as I said, is in Genesis started, and going back to Book of Revelation, the end, the new heaven, the new earth, restoring back Eden, new Eden. So in order for God to communicate his message, a certain geographical location, as I explained before, it's been chosen. But living in the land is with this God is not God that say, I am the God of the land, or you own the land. With this God, is really difficult God. It's very problematic God. He said, you can live in this land as long you believe in me, as long you love me, don't offer a sacrifice to appease me of my wrath. And more than anything else, how you treat the least of them and how you lease the land, that is precondition if you are in the land, because I am the owner of the land. Read the book of Leviticus; it's all over. So this from this land that started as I gave the Samaritan story, and after you move into the New Testament, Jesus talked about the land, and people miss it because the language he's using is saying for his disciples that you go out from Jerusalem to Judea, Samaria, to the end of the earth, proclaiming the kingdom of God. So the whole of the cosmos is a subject for our witness, our compassion to all people in the land around the world. And he is using the 10 commandments, for example, in Ephesians, you should honor your father and mother, and many, many verses that connect people to the land. So what's happened in the land, if before God was confined to very specific geographical location through the church, that at that time is Israelite and non-Israelite, that they came together in unity in Jesus, proclaiming Jesus throughout all the land. So I don't see in any place that God gave land deeds to any group of people. And also you go back to the definition who is Israelite. And so in order to understand the situation today, we have to understand it in the context of, sadly to say, that first of all, if we go a little bit back, Jesus talking about Jerusalem and about the temple, and he predicted the destruction of the temple. With temple, what we call temple Judaism in theology and history, it was very pluralistic. There were many groups. Two groups emerged. One, they were Jews or Israelite and others, that they are the disciples of Jesus, that from there came Christianity. Many Palestinian Christians are from Jewish descent that stayed in the land, like the previous mayor of Bethlehem, his last name, Hananiah. Hananiah is a very Jewish name. He said, yeah, we were from Second Temple, we believe in Jesus, we stayed in the land. Many Palestinian by DNA are Jews. Israelites.
That's revelatory. I think many people don't know that.
Talk about it. So the idea that all the Jews left the land and moved somewhere else, historically, yes, some left, no doubt about it. But also Judaism was very evangelistic religion. If you remember, Jesus said that Moses is being preached all over. And when Paul was going to the synagogue, there were Jews, proselyte, and also God-fearing people. So there are you can find DNA linkage, but again, that is racial, very dangerous language to give any group of people rights and privileges in any places around the world just because who is their mother or father in that sense. So with that, the development, rabbinical Judaism have been developed in the land, most of it, not in Jerusalem. Judea, the area of Jerusalem, changed to be included in Palestina or Palestine, and Jews moved to Yavne, where the Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai beginning to develop what I call, and some people will not like it, the first replacement theology. Is a theology that come to replace the temple, the priest, and the sacrifice. The rabbi become the connection between the people and God, and instead of sacrifice is commandment, fasting, and giving almsgiving and helping people. It became the thing. So there's two movements that developed, and sadly to say, those two movements developed quite a bit of animosity toward each other. And this animosity has come to peak, very negative peak in Eastern Europe, when classical anti-Semitic ideology become also political anti-Semitic with the rise of nationalism. And Jews that lived in Eastern Europe, confined to, and they by choice and by force, to their ghetto, they wanted to get out of Eastern Europe, and they wanted to go to America. They wanted to go to Britain, and America closed the door. Millions of Jews went to America. Canada closed its door too by First World War. So there are, this is where we come. There is a young secular Jews started a movement called Zionism. Zionism is a national movement of the Jewish people, because rabbinical Jews were against building a political state in Jerusalem. And this is the reason why Orthodox Jews until today against the state of Israel. You see that in the demonstration, very Orthodox Jews are demonstrating with the Palestinian. So what this movement is, it's European nationalist settler colonial movement. What that's mean? A group of people like your ancestors out of desperation, probably your ancestor back, religious persecution, economic reason, wars. They wanted to build for them home, a safe haven. So the Zionist movement, after looking to different options, one option was Uganda, Argentina. They said, why not we have, and they do have, historical and religious connection to the Holy Land, and why we do not establish the Jewish home state, and that's a modern term, by the way.
Right.
State, and in that process, they changed the definition of Israelite or Jew from religious ethnic community into nation, into people. That not all Jews agree on that, by the way. So that is the definition of Zionism. And another thing, we have to be careful, not all Jews are Zionists. We're talking about Zionist movement. And Zionism accepted, to a large degree, the anti-Semitic charge against the Jews. And what it is, one, there's no place for Jews in Europe. There's only place for Jews in Palestine or Palestine. Second, that the Jewish society in the ghetto, especially Eastern society, are not unhealthy society. So the new messianic Zionist of the Jewish man that in one side, he plows the land and he has a rifle defending himself. They wanted to establish exclusive Jewish state because they were in desperate need. The biggest problem, the land was not empty. There were people living there, like in Canada, indigenous people.
A land with no people for a people with no land.
That the land is dead, it's a mess. That there were land without people, people without land. And we bought into it when we saw the movie Exodus with the beautiful blue eyes, Paul Newman, Leon Yaris, the Hajj, all this narrative that is false, that many of us bought it in, that there's no Palestinian people. And that is very typical of settler colonial endeavor. And from a settler colonial study, we say that 1917 is the year that officially the Zionist movement became settler colonial with the Balfour Declaration, that the British Empire wanted to, because of political reasons, because they were anti-Semitic, they didn't want all those millions of Jews to come into Britain. Remember, Eastern European Jews were not the Rothschild or Montefiore. They were like the fiddler of the roof. They were very simple people, poor people, many children, didn't speak Yiddish, and they were not the rich, as is another anti-Semitic view that people have. They were really desperate people.
I'm just going to stop you there, because I listened to a lecture by Haviv Rettig-Gur, and he was saying the Palestinians got us wrong. You know, he's claiming that they're not a colonial settler movement. He's saying basically that we were refugees because Canada didn't want us, US didn't want us, Russia didn't want us. We had nowhere to go. We were refugees, and so we immigrated over there because in their perception it was going to be a safe place for them. And you're saying perhaps that's the case, but in doing so, they created this conflict with the Palestinians. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it is Zionist movement. Jewish Eastern European Jews They were, let me go back. The whole thing started around 200 years ago when Jews were allowed to get out of the ghetto. In the ghetto, they were living Orthodox Jews, you see some of them in New York in their Jewish neighborhood, not connected to the larger society. So the ghetto wall went down. The rabbi lost control of the Jewish community. Young Jews went out to study, to mix with people, and they called themselves German of the religion of Moses, French of the religion of Moses. They moved, lived, and you have the Reformed Jews as a result movement come. They saw themselves as German with the religion of Moses. But in Eastern Europe, the situation was different because the socio-economic and the development in Eastern Europe that we don't have the time to talk about it. For example, Poland wanted to become a Polish state. And the Polish begin to ask themselves, who are those people, the third of the Poland that they call themselves Jews? Are they Polish? Are they Russian? Are they Jews? Are they socialists? Are they communists? So there's a lot of factors go in. So those young people realized that anti-Semitic ideology is very prominent, very strong in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, if a nation state is a solution for the European, is a nation state is a solution for us. And we need to have a state where Jews can be protected and Jews can keep their identity. In the beginning, it's not that other doors were closed, because this is the reason there are millions of Jews in New York, for example, in the United States. And closing the door was, and the desperation was coming more and more toward First World War. So at the beginning, they came with the idea, we want to keep our Jewish identity. We want to keep our Jewish culture, and didn't even talk about, some of them, they define Judaism as culture and not as religion. So the problem is that when they came as refugees, and this is, Jewish refugees were coming into the Middle East before with the Spanish Inquisition. And when Spain kicked the Jews out of Spain, a lot of them went into the Middle East and they were welcome. The problem that those Jews were coming as from Eastern Europe, they didn't come only as refugees. They wanted to establish exclusive Jewish state, and that is the problem.
And some of
the
sorry, Salim, what that's raising is something that seems to be a very real pressing undercurrent to the current conflict, which is this long history and story that you're unpacks and exposes a historical wound that is a desire for security, a need for security. And you hear that in the news,
really
right?
It's really reasonable though, right, Phil? Like when you think about,
well, because everybody wants that, right?
Well,
like
Benny Morris, the historian, he talked about Jews coming out of the Holocaust, and they were thinking maybe there's a God, maybe there's not, but never again right. Are we going to expose ourselves because we have such a huge amount of fear and not sure if we can trust God.
That's a crucial point. And so this theme and this desire for security is a human desire.
Yeah.
And we should all empathize with what has happened to the Jewish people historically.
Absolutely.
Like, it's horrible.
That's not the problem.
That is not the problem. Exactly. It's this need for security. And we haven't even talked about, and Salim, you could talk about this too, but we haven't even talked about the impact of the Ottoman Empire and Islam on the Jewish community over the years, which also, now we have embedded in some state ideologies the destruction of the state of Israel, right? Like you have, and the destruction of the Jews.
I will not rush to there. We have to be careful, and it is modern. This is more modern phenomena. But
totally,
let's go back.
My point is the need for
somebody
security.
Somebody else security and freedom cannot be on somebody else's expense.
Exactly, and this is where.
Yeah, when I hear you,
Phil. I do want to hear. Let Phil finish his.
Sorry, Salim. I'll just, because actually, what this is drawing us back to as Christians is this biblical picture, and the New Testament unpacks it. Peter the Jew, says, he's saying to the church, now Jew and Gentile, one new family, the new household of God, because of what Jesus has done on the cross. Ephesians chapter 2, he's broke down the dividing wall of hostility. There is a new household, a new family. And Peter will say to the, the dispersed church, Jew and Gentile, you are a peculiar people, right? You are now this fullness of the revelation of what God has always been about. And now you're dispersed, and you're this sojourners and exiles. And he uses language that had been applied to Israel and is now bringing together the sojourner and the exile into this peculiar people that are meant to be a witness and a presence and a prophetic voice for the way, the kingdom of God in the world. And so all this desire for security, as Christians, we would say this is not rooted in having specific borders. It's rooted in living the way of Jesus.
Oh,
so anyway,
amen.
I just wanted to insert that, and then Salim, you bring back what you were going to say there, because I think it's important.
This is what I hear. It reflects what we see, or some of us see it as racist and racist language and imperial language. That in all this conversation,
Salim, you have to come closer to your mic, I think.
Yeah. In all this conversation that we have, that the Palestinians are not people. Their desire, their aspiration, and they're not mentioned at all. I read the history book. I've been visiting Canada so many times. The Jews suffered so much, the Holocaust, so they need a state, and they have the state in Israel. Tough, the Palestinian people paid the price. They suffer so much. How much you suffer compared to them? This is really a very problematic language. But if the Europeans are the ones that inflicting the most pain on the Jews, and European and American until today are punishing the Palestinian for what the West did to the Jews. That is the crux of the matter, that we have here a situation that the Western world have embraced Zionism as a global project, that not all Jews agreed in it. They embrace nation state as a solution for a people group that we know it's problematic, not only for Jews, also for Arab, for Palestinian, for Canadian, for everybody. And the German, their lesson from the Holocaust is that Israel, the state of Israel, has become the national project of the German nationalism. This is really anti-Semitic because Jews have the right to choose wherever they want to live, like you and me and everybody. If Jews want to live in Canada, if Jews want to live in the United States, if Jews want to live wherever they want, that they have the right. But we accept it. I mean, I'm saying we, not us, a group, as the politic accepted that the Jews need to be concentrated and live only in Palestine, and this is their place. Okay?
And you're calling that anti-Semitic?
Yes, it is the definition of anti-Semitism. That's what Hitler wanted to do. What Hitler wanted to do to kick all the Jews from Europe. He was saying to them, go to Palestine. That's what the Nazis were saying. And when in the end of 41, 42, when America and Western Europe closed the door and Canada closed the door, then he went to kill them, to destroy them, to exterminate them. And
but are they trying to help the Jews out of guilt, or are they trying to, at the time, were they, well, you're saying this is a German solution, an American solution. Were they at the time anti-Semitic and saying we just want you over here and nowhere else? Or now has that transformed today? And is it more perhaps, we feel badly about what we did, and so we're going to support the state of Israel? Because I'm hearing both.
This is a twist of it. Anti-Semitic have different form, but in one form is Lord Balfour were anti-Semitic. The elite of American Europe were anti-Semitic. They didn't want all those million Eastern Jews to come to their land, so they closed the border. For Balfour Declaration, one of the reasons of Balfour Declaration is the problem of the Jewish refugees. Millions of Jews were running for their life. That is given. But the definition of settler colonial academically is a group of people, because of security, because of economic, religious, whatever reason, are looking to establish homeland for themselves, and that's what it is. But happen on the indigenous people expense. In that process, there are several things that happen. One is a logic of elimination. You want to eliminate the native. By the way, United States of America and Canada did a good job with that. Yeah. If you cannot eliminate them physically, you want to eliminate their attachment to the land, their identity, and their culture and their family. And in Canada, for example, they used to send the indigenous people to schools, and that would broken the families in Canada too. In Australia, by the way, they did it. And so let's say, okay, the Second World War happened, Holocaust happened, and the Jews want to have a safe haven for themselves. And that came on the expense of the Palestinian, because the solution to that, for 35% of people that already came with the help of the British into Palestine at that time, they received 55% of the land. And the idea of ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian already started from the beginning of the Zionist leaders. They say the Zionist leaders realized that the land is not empty. Khada'am, one of the Jewish thinkers, said, hey, the land is, the bride is beautiful, but somebody else already took her. That is a Hebrew expression. That means the land is beautiful, but somebody else living there. Right. So the idea of moving the people out, and that also behind the policy that's happening in Gaza right now, by the way. And that the policy is going in Jerusalem right now. This is what happened to my family, is moving the people out. And that is a problem. And we need to, this is the reason, as a Christian, I believe reconciliation is the solution to deconstruct settler colonialism. How the settler and the native can live together. We have several models, like in South Africa, not perfect, but there's no bloodshed, you know? Right. So in that context, the settler colonial has to let go his racial, religious supremacy and sovereignty. He has to share it. And together, we have to live in the land as equal people. It's not this or that. The Jewish people the Israeli Jews in the land, not all the Jews. We shouldn't mix that. Not all the Jews are Zionists. There's all type of Jews, like there are all type of Muslims. There's all type of Palestinian. And the people living the land, they have to let go the exclusive Jewish state. And this land, Palestine, Israel, Holy Land, will be home for two people groups that they are equal by law, equal in all aspects of that. That is the solution. So Salim, by just I want to finish with that. By saying the land is for the Jews and suffering, the consequence of that, and this is where I would like you to think about it a little bit, there is moral, ethical consequences. We give green light for hating the other, not seeing the Palestinian people, not seeing the Muslims as people, not seeing Arab, Christian, Middle East as equal, and are giving light for war. And this is very colonial, settler colonial language. We have to be careful with that language.
And June, just before you say what you're going to want to say there, what you're saying, Salim, as Christians should remind us of the beauty and the power of the gospel revealed in Jesus. Because in the midst of all of this that you've described, it has always been God's intention and revealed in Jesus and built into the nature of being the family of God, Jew and Gentile, that there would be a people witnessing to something different. The only ultimate hope in the midst of all this is actually not even our particular theologies, but it's Jesus. And this is to whom we should be pointing as the people of God, not rallying behind certain ideologies. And as God's people, like the three of us here, we're Gentiles, right? So
I don't like the term Gentiles because originally
we're right, of course, but we're not I'm not historically Jewish. I've been brought in the same way all people are meant to be brought in, through Jesus. And so our witness is to point, and in our relationships among ethnicities, the beauty of Revelation is that every tribe, people, and language is before the throne. They don't lose their unique identity, and
I hear you,
in Christ,
Phil.
it changes.
So, I hear you, Phil. But go ahead.
Really beautiful.
Go ahead,
I sometimes criticize other podcasters for not getting to a solution. So as Christians, I think it's incumbent upon us to try to understand the Jewish mind. And as I am learning, there's two Jewish minds. One is the Torah Jew, who is quite happy not to be in the land of Palestine, and they think Mashiach is going to return and straighten all things out. And then there is the secular Jew who lives in the land of Palestine, and in their mind, their security is based on having just them by themselves, I think. So, Salim, how can you impact that thinking? How can the Christian impact the thinking of the Jew who says, I absolutely need a land that's only Jewish, otherwise we're going to be slaughtered by the Palestinians or whatever, because we're at a place where we're at now. All of this may have been avoided, but now there's this group of people living in this land called the Israelis, and they are hyper secure. I've argued that their security is dependent upon the security of the Palestinians, that they're one and the same. But how can Christians?
I think Christians need to be. I think Christians need to be aware and waking up to the problem. Mm-hmm. I think the way you present it is from my point of view, is very problematic. The people getting slaughtered since 1948 are the Palestinians, not the Jews.
Well, there are definitely Jews that were slaughtered at various
but we're
times.
talking about people. Talking about modern time in the conflict between Israel and Palestine. And I'm not saying the Jews were not killed by Palestinian violent resistance. I'm not saying that.
Okay.
You have 200 million people in Gaza for the 8 months under starvation, bombardment, no home. 85% of Gaza has been destroyed. You have almost 40,000 people get killed, and that I cannot understand how we as human, I really have a problem as a human, seeing other human people are being slaughtered and asking the question how I'm getting into the Jewish mind.
Okay.
It's problematic. It's very problematic thinking. We need to get into the mind of Christ. This is what Paul all the time, the mind of Christ, the mind of Christ. It's not this fascination with Jews and Judaism very, very problematic, because I think it's racist, because attributing to Jewish by nature or something that's not. It's very important to study the Jewish background of Jesus, to understand the Jewish background of Jesus and the Second Temple, and we need to do that. But to get into the brain of the Jews, I want to get to the brain of Jesus, the mind of Christ, and that is what we need. Let me put a push here. This is, I think, is very important. I think maybe there is a blind eye, because my family in 1948-47 been displaced, 750,000 Palestinians. Their home has been destroyed, including Christians. You're not asking that question. You're asking about Jewish security, not asking about the people that have been victimized and killed. You're not asking that question. How come? This is a good question you should ask. How come people that have been traumatized by the Holocaust and have not dealt with this redemptively are committing a slaughter and genocide of other people groups? That is the failure of humanity. We have right now one of the biggest crises, and the young people in university understand it, the biggest crisis of Western civilization, that in 21st century, we are, as government, as a people, as a church, are enabling silence when happening one of the most awful things that didn't start in October. It started before in the West Bank and Israel.
Mm-hmm.
This is where the question should be. How come that happened? And the question is more than that. In our conversation, the question is, what is the mind of Palestinian Christians? What Palestinian Christians think? What the church here think? What is their position? I'm not saying you, but what I see, total blindness to the humanity, first, of Palestinian, Arab, and Muslim, because especially after 9/11, the process of demonization of Palestinian and Muslims happening all the road, totally forgetting Jesus' commandment to love our neighbors, our enemy. And we as Palestinian Middle Eastern Christian we came to the conclusion that we cannot trust the Church of the West. The Church of the West failed all the time. It's failing right now. We need to trust God. And the question that we asked, we have colleagues in Armenia, how the church reacted, all the church, but especially the Western church that has more power and political power, to what happened in Nagorno-Karabakh, that when 110,000 Armenian Christians been kicked out of their home, silence, no reaction. But how the church reacted to October 7th, when 1,200, 300 Jews were killed. It's good questions. It says more about the West, because one of the things that happened after the Holocaust is that the West, that had the ultimate other, the Jews, the Muslim, the Semite, with that guilt, they made the Jews almost white, almost Christian, with the development of this notion, Judeo-Christian civilization. The Jews, rabbinical Jews, will never accept that. And Jews also, out of desperation, wanted to be part of the elite of Europe. So when Palestinian Christian is being killed, hundreds of them have been killed, like in the Church of Gaza, I don't remember exactly the number, 20 or 30 people could kill. There's no reaction by the Church of the West to the killing of 1,300 Jews. And that shows me that there is a major problem in the theology, major problem in understanding the scripture, but more than anything else, is major misunderstanding who Jesus is and what Jesus called us to be in the world. And we're calling for war. We are calling for, under the just war principle, to continue to slaughter the Palestinian. Palestinian are people created by God in his image. They're loved by God, like the Jews, like anybody else, like you and I. And if we are not concerned about them, it is our problem. It is our problem. It's a Western church problem in its silence, complacency, and enabling by hundreds of millions of dollars. Do you know that there are churches in a group of churches from Canada, pastor originally from Canada, going around raising money for the Israeli army?
Yeah, it's very troubling to me. So may I respond to that?
Yes.
Okay, so the reason I asked that, and I'm certainly blinded in certain ways, I'm convinced of that, and that's why I appreciate having you on the podcast to illuminate some of the things and misunderstandings that I have had and maybe some other Western Christians have had. In trying to understand the Jewish mind, I think, though, that I'm coming from a place of wanting to help the Palestinians. Maybe I'm going about it the wrong way, but in asking what in the world will get through to that mind from a Christian, as a Christian, what can I do? How can I, and I'll rephrase the questions. As a Christian, what can I do to help in this situation? But I think But I think somehow we have to get through to this very powerful nation. Maybe we don't. Maybe maybe that's not even something that we need to be concerned about, but that certainly is where my mind went. But you're saying, let's adopt the mind of Christ, and in so doing, then my solution is, obviously it's not an encompassing solution by any means, but you have to understand both sides, and you have to understand even our own perspective of what's going on. So what can we do to impact the trajectory of the Jews, to help them come to an understanding that the Palestinians are a people that are worthy and that have worth and need to be held up and allowed to live, allowed to breathe, allowed to have their own sovereignty over their own area?
Salim, before you, sorry, I was muted.
Yeah.
Before you respond, I think one of the key things that we need to recognize from the West is that Christians in the West need a greater awareness and honoring of the voice and experience of our Christian brothers and sisters who are in the land. What Salim is raising is a family conversation. So this is one part of it, where we need to listen to our Christian brothers and sisters and act as family. This is one of the parts that's missing, and it saddens me, is that in the West, many Christians dismiss the voice of their family, of Christian brothers and sisters, and turn instead to ideological political positions that are rooted in other things. So one element, in response to your question, June, I think, and then Salim, you fill in the other, but one element is to humbly listen to the voice of our Christian brothers and sisters and help and correct course in terms of how we speak, act, what we support, where we send money, all these things that we would. This is actually rooted even in, Paul was clear in his missionary journeys, as he puts forward basically a fundraising campaign, is actually to care for fellow believers in the land. And that is actually a part that seems to be missing in the West, is we try to go to, kind of ethnic political responses instead of acting like family, which Jesus won for us at the cross. So I just add that. So Salim, go ahead.
Oh, thank you.
No, thank you very much, June. This broadcast is one of the few that I've been invited, or other Palestinian Christians have been invited in Christian circle to speak up. The voices that are listening to us, people want to listen to us right now, are not coming from the church or people of the church, sadly to say. The prophetic voice is not in the church right now. But Phil touched upon a very, very important point that I'm saying that to be thankful to you, that the way I feel, that when you ask these questions, what the Jewish mind is thinking, that's the way I hear it, okay? Maybe I'm wrong. That the Jewish mind and thinking is more important to you than hearing my opinion, my mind, how we as Palestinian Christians thinking about we're going to achieve peace, what we think about the situation. So that is, again, silencing a voice. And this is a problem. We think we are part of the family, but the family doesn't want to have our voice. And we are one of the oldest surviving churches in history here. If you really study our history from the beginning until the 4th century, we're persecuted. Then from the 7th century, we are second class as people. So in history, I think Middle Eastern Christian are people that are the longest people that learned how to survive without political power. Some did, some did not, some left. So, but still the people are in the land. The issue that I think that is more important here is the fact is the scripture, because going to be teaching the Gospel of Mark to the home group. It's Gospel of Mark is showing how the disciples failed. The failure of humanity. What's happening here is the failure of humanity. One, we as humans failed. And it's not because the Jewish mind, Arab mind, Palestinian mind, Muslim mind, humanity failed when humanity does what it did here. And not, there is another thing that is very, very important here that I hear. That people are trying to there are two standards, double approach to the Jewish people and to the non-Jewish people that living in the land. And that is really problematic. And this is a crisis of Western civilization right now, that Gaza become the cross point of the failure of the Western civilization and Christian civilization right now in the world. The name of Jesus is being despised right now in many quarters around the world because what's happening in Gaza and what's happened to the Palestinians overall in general, without overlooking the suffering of the Israeli Jews. By the way, we have to be careful, Israeli Jews and not Jews in general. In order to when you have a bully at the school, you have to stop him bullying other people the weak, and not try to not try to get into his mind. Right now, the bully, right now, the state of Israel with its military power, with a license, especially for the United States of America and all of that, is doing all of that. That has to stop. And understanding the failure of that has to stop. The first thing, the war has to stop. And instead of trying to understand a man that is in his 30s beating up 5-year-old boy, first of all, you stop the 30-year-old man beating up the 5-year-old boy. That's what is needed right now. The Palestinian people are not fighting the Israeli Jews. I think there is or resisting the Israeli Jews. I think there is, maybe I'll give you a different perspective. America, Canada, France, England, and Germany, other nations, are fighting the Palestinians. There are American soldiers in our country, British soldiers in the country. There are weapons and bombs being supplied by United States, England, and that. So we are not dealing with the Israeli Jews. We're dealing with the Western world. The Western world is the one. The Biden is the one that's supplying the bombs. Biden did not veto ceasefire at the Security Council. And that is not coming to say discounting that or discounting what Hamas did or discounting the killing or all the atrocities that Hamas did. As a Christian, many times I hear the question, what would you do if you were Israeli at 7th of October? And I'll say, I'll stop. I'll think. Mm-hmm. I'll think my reaction, my responsibility. I'll think if bombing the neighbor is going to solve the problem, if bombing the neighbor brings a hostage, if bombing the homes and hospitals and schools is going to solve that. Because for each person, father that died, there is a child that now is going to ask for the revenge of his father and his revenge. And that is the problem here. It is the way it's been approached. So I think with anger, with the power, with settler colonial mindset, this opportunity to kick the Palestinian, they went and did what they did in Gaza. And that right now we are in a mess. Israel is in a mess. The Palestinian is a mess. Israel mess in Gaza, Israel mess in the north with Lebanon, with Hezbollah, Israel mess in the Red Sea. Our people is being killed left and right. It is a mess, and the mess is a byproduct of failed policy. What is a failed policy? The failed policy that they did not give from 1948 until today, Palestinian their right to be free, to be equal to Israeli Jews. That's the crux of the matter.
Okay.
And it's failed, and that is where the failure, and we're paying the price for it, because the Palestinian is not going to disappear. The Palestinian is going to stay here. I am a Palestinian Christian going to stay here. Come and kill us. We're not moving. This is our home. This is the land where Jesus born, taught, healed, crucified, and resurrected, and we want to be witness for that historical event. We're not moving out of it.
Yeah,
and not thinking that Palestinian Christian, Jerusalem is their city, that this land is our homeland, also of the Jews, also Palestinian Muslim, is very problematic.
It's very powerful to hear you say that, Salim. I'm not trying to get off the hot seat because, you're correcting my very foundation of the question. I'm looking at the state of Israel, trying to get into their mindset rather than trying to understand what it means to hear the Palestinian, not just the Palestinian Christian, but also the Palestinian. However, there's a very powerful group of people that are slaughtering the Palestinians, and that's where I'm coming from. Not because I don't want to hear what you have to say. Where do we move? How do we move as Christians? And what I'm hearing is, first of all, we need to hear from the others in our family. I would love it if you could come to Kelowna, British Columbia, and speak to the church that I'm a part of. I'd love it if you'd come to a number of churches. So that's one thing that's rolling through my mind, to try to honor your voice and to hear what you're saying. I feel like I have heard a great deal actually of your perspective. How is that perspective going to impact these policymakers?
Yeah, we should right now advocate for ceasefire. Stop the killing. When you stop the killing, people start sitting and talking, and maybe we can find solution. You have the power. It's not that you need to convince Israel. It's the other way. How you convince your political powers in Ontario, Canada, in DC, in London, how those people that have the power, that they say no. It's simple. It's simple. But they will not say no. There is a reason why they don't say no. It's not from Christian perspective. For other reasons, is we don't have the. So you should be involved with people calling for ceasefire for the safety of both Israeli Jews and Palestinians.
As a starting point. Yeah.
That's starting point. Then we start talking. Let's talk about how we address it. First, stop the killing, the massacre. There is a CNN journalist that read an article where she said she was in Iraq, Syria. She was when ISIS was in Iraq. She went to Gaza. She said, "What I see in Gaza, it's worse than any other place in the world." And she said, "This is where humanity lost its face."
Yeah.
You don't know, and I don't know the full scale. I mean, I know more because I'm living here, and I have other. Average Westerner is being shielded, filtered, that you're not getting the right information. Your main media is not telling you how awful the situation is, and how terrible the situation is. And I find talking to Westerner really difficulty for they don't believe, they don't really. I'm not saying you, so don't think I'm saying.
No, it's fine.
Yeah, it's like in the mental, they cannot comprehend that Jews are doing those things. They don't comprehend that their government is doing that. So I'm trying to say the situation is worse 100 times more than you hear in the news or what I see. And when the war stop, when we discover what's happened, we will be asking the question, where have you been in the last 8 months?
Right.
And we went back. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say with that, I think we'll stop there. And I want to talk further about you coming to Canada. I'm very serious about that. Thank you so much, Salim. Thank you, Phil, for your time, your insight, wisdom, education, and your lived experience in the land, Salim. I'm just so grateful that Phil asked you to come on.
Thank you.
I feel like I've learned a lot, and I have a renewed sense of what to do and how to proceed as a Christian. So thank you. Thank you, Phil.
And thank you for giving me the space to speak and the freedom. I really appreciate that, June, and I respect it and honor that. And thank you, Phil, for being humble, chosen to give me space for me to speak.
Absolutely. I hope to come and visit you. Are you in
I live in Jerusalem. I live in Jerusalem.
Right now?
I live in Jerusalem, just 20 minutes walk from the old city. So you're welcome to come. I do suggest strongly, if you and your friends come and we can arrange for you a tour, that you visit the Israeli, you visit the Palestinian. I don't know if you have been in the land, that you see the beauty, the richness, the pain, the complexity, because it is center for you and for us.